Hello and welcome to the AIDS United webinar, Strengthening Human Resources Infrastructure for HIV Organizations, Recruitment, Interviewing, and Onboarding. This is the second in a two-part series. This webinar is in listen-only mode. You can listen over your computer by enabling the audio through ReadyTalk, or you can call the number on your screen. If at any point you have a question or a concern with the ReadyTalk functionality or about the content of the webinar, you can send us a chat using the chat feature is in the lower left hand of your screen. The webinar is being recorded. The webinar recording will be made available along with the slides at aidsunited.org/webinars. I'm going to turn it over to the conference presenters, Adrienne and Kelly.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sarah. My name is Kelly Stevens. I'm so delighted to be co-presenting with Adrienne for the second webinar. But before we jump in, just want to briefly share a little bit about the organization. Adrienne and I are both members of the Capacity Building Assistance team here at AIDS United. And the slide that you see in front of you just speaks briefly to some of the many ways in which the organization engages in HIV prevention work with the mission of ending AIDS. Again, Adrienne and I are part of our Capacity Building Assistance team, but we also engage in quite a bit of grant making, policy, advocacy, as well as some research. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it right over to Adrienne to jump in to the second webinar of this series.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for attending webinar 2 of this three-part series focusing on human resources. Thank you so much, Kelly, for doing the intro, and thank you so much, Sarah, for helping folks work out the ReadyTalk information and giving them those necessary details. I do want to introduce myself. As Kelly stated, my name is Adrienne Neal Jr. I work with the capacity building team at AIDS United, and I will be the one that will be taking you through the content as it relates to human resources. So if you attended yesterday's webinar series, we kind of did like an intro to human resources management. So we kind of defined what human resources management was, as well as some of the functionalities that fall under that umbrella. And then we also talked about key functions that we are going to be focusing on during this webinar. And some of those functions are going to be the recruitment process, interviewing/hiring, as well as onboarding. And we're going to talk about best practices as it relates to those three areas and some things that you can do to really rev up your human resources functions within your organization. Something that I do want to mention right off the bat is that we will be able to, or not be able to, but we will also have resources provided at the end of each webinar that you can kind of click the link to and be able to download certain tools and things of that nature. Also, I do want to let folks know that you can come to AIDS United for TA, technical assistance, as relates to each, or not each, but some of the content that we'll be delivering today. And Kelly will kind of go over that with you some more at the end of this webinar. So with that being said, we are going to go ahead forward. And I'm sorry, I was just told that I need to speak up. I apologize if folks have not been able to hear what I just talked about. I will make sure to speak up and speak a little more clearly. So as I stated, we are going to be talking some more about recruiting, interviewing, and onboarding best practices, as well as answer key questions that you all have, provide some resources for tools, and then move forward and talk about some things that are going to be happening in webinar 3. So moving forward, yesterday we went over some glossary terms that you will hear throughout this webinar series. Some of those terms are EEO, Equal Employment Opportunity, EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, HR, Human Resources, HRM, Human Resources Management, SHRM, Society for Human Resources Management, JD, Job Description, a term that everyone is probably familiar with, PLWH, People Living with HIV, and KSA, Knowledge, Skills, and Ability. These are some terms that you will be hearing about moving forward in the webinar, and And at any time you have any questions on how they're being used or what they mean, please feel free to ask in the chat box, and we will answer that question for you or address the question for you. The outline for Webinar 2. So we're first going to tackle recruitment best practices. So we're going to be talking about some recruitment process guidance, some position description, do's and don'ts. Second part, we're going to be focusing on interviewing best practices. So interview guidance, questions, and techniques, interview do's and don'ts, and also talking about onboarding best practices. So onboarding planning guidance and then onboarding do's and don'ts. And then all of these sections will also encompass or also include some other content that will be very helpful as it relates to implementing these things within your organization. The learning objectives for today's webinar are, by the end of this webinar, participants will learn best practices for developing a position description, also known as a job description, obtain tips and tools to strengthen the interview process, and understand the basic components of new hire onboarding. So there's some three objectives, those are three key objectives that we will be focusing on today. And then, of course, you'll be learning a whole bunch of other stuff that will help you be able to really make sure that you are implementing these practices. And I just saw in the chat box that people can hear me. So hopefully the sound gets better as we progress through the webinar. I apologize for any quality of sound issues that people may be having. So some HR guiding principles that we're going to kind of be leaning on as we move forward with this webinar, and some guiding principles that we actually advise that you move forward on, that you lean on as well. People are the most important assets of an organization, right? And that is very true. Without people, without the individuals that are doing the work, without you all, we would not be able to do the awesome and amazing work that we're able to do within communities, right? So without the investment within people, without the investment into people, without, developing them, growing them, appreciating them, we wouldn't be where we are today. The second guiding principle is personnel policies and procedures that are closely linked with the achievement of the organization's objectives and mission. Personnel policies and procedures are key, right, because they act as a reference. They act as a reference for employees and leadership to be able to go to be able to help push certain things within the organization forward, right? They kind of lead us. They kind of guide us. And personnel policies can look like anything from, performance evaluation policies, attendance policy, who to go to as it relates to certain things, maybe sort of pay and compensation, things of that nature. Maybe how raises are done, there being a policy on that, a de-escalation policy. So, for a lot of us or a lot of individuals who work with communities, who work and see clients on a daily basis, you may have some conflict that arises with clients. And so to be able to have a de-escalation policy that employees can reference to make sure that they're doing it the correct way in order to not put themselves or their clients in danger can be very beneficial, right? And making sure that those personnel policies and procedures align with the mission of the organization. The third guiding principle that we want you all to lean on is it's HR's responsibility to find, secure, guide, and develop employees whose talents and desires are compatible with the operating needs and future goals of the organization. So really making sure that we find key talent, really making sure that we find individuals that possess certain qualities and characteristics that are going to be able to move the work that we do forward. So making sure we have culturally humble staff, right? Making sure that we have staff that, if they're working with a certain population, for example, HIV-positive individuals, that they have some type of lived experience as it relates to that community, right? And if they don't have a lived experience, making sure that they're culturally humble enough to learn from that community and to continue to be able to serve that community in a way that is open-minded. And then also making sure that we are hiring staff that are going to do their job, right? I mean, essentially, that is what it is, making sure that they are going to, show up for work and show up on time and, have a certain position about them that is going to ensure that they're doing their work to the best of their ability in order to meet the needs of the community and the people that the organization is serving. So these are 3 guiding principles that we found that, not only we lean on, but we advise and encourage organizations and CBOs to be able to lean on as well. So some of the HR functions that fall under human resources management are recruitment, selection, placement, onboarding, and promotion. These are many of the things that we are going to be discussing today, some things that we discussed yesterday, and some things that we'll talk about in webinar 3. Performance appraisal, training, development. So performance appraisal is key, definitely key, and it's something that we can definitely talk more in depth one-on-one with those individuals or those organizations who maybe want some TA on, the proper way to develop and implement a performance appraisal system. And then training and development is so key, right? We want to train and develop our staff. We want to make sure that they feel as though we are investing in them and that we're invested in their career development. We definitely do not want to hire staff as outreach or testers or program managers with the intent on keeping them in that role forever, right? We want to make sure that we're offering them opportunities and we're offering them trainings to grow, not just within that role, but within the organization. Health and safety risk management, right? Making sure staff and employees feel safe, making sure that, they don't feel as though they're going to be harassed, or making sure that they're going to be treated equitably, as far in some instances equally, right? Making sure that we're paying staff the correct way, making sure they feel safe as it relates to that, making sure that they feel safe on their team, making sure that they feel safe to talk to their supervisor, making sure that they feel safe to talk to their colleagues. These are all things that are important that kind of fall under that larger umbrella of human resources management. And then record keeping, labor relations, grievances, and disciplinary actions, right? That record keeping is really, really, really key, right? Making sure that you have some type of system in place, some type of policy on how long you should keep certain documents. How long should you keep an employee performance evaluation? How long should you keep a candidate's resume on file and/or application? How long should you keep certain test results? How long should you keep certain documents that you do for the grant that you currently have or serve on, right? And then the disciplinary action, right? Is there a policy on how we are going to discipline in the unfortunate times term employees? And is that documented? Are we documenting each step and each behavior during that process? For example, there are some organizations that may, feel as though that may end up terming someone and not really documenting why they termed someone, right? And then that person who was terminated can come back and file a lawsuit or whatever the case may be. I definitely have seen that happen in my experience. So to protect the organization, to be able to, you should document every step. So if you find that the employee is not showing up on time for work, if they're supposed to be at their workstation at 8 a.m., but they're showing up at 8:30, 8:45, and you've had, 3 conversations with them, and then you want to move to the next step and move to the next step, making sure that those are documented and making sure there's actually a process or a policy that is put in place that, the whole organization has to follow. And then wages, salary, bonuses, incentives, payroll, etc. These are all functions that fall under the larger human resources management umbrella. And we definitely know that, all these functions cannot be done due to a staff capacity. Many times in the CBO environment, there's one person who may be a program manager or a program director who's also doing hiring, who's also doing disciplinary action, who's also doing recruitment, who's also responsible for doing their job descriptions, right? And so as well as making sure that they're meeting the deliverables for their grant. So we definitely want to make sure we wanted to make sure that we were giving you functions that you can kind of implement right away and then come to us for some more support as it relates to these larger other functions that you may want to implement. All righty. So we are going to go ahead and jump right on in with recruitment best practices. So as I stated earlier in the call today, we started here first yesterday with webinar 1. And so we're going to go over recruitment best practices again, but talk about it a little bit more in depth. So first we have an audience poll. So if you can take a few moments and answer this question for me, how would you describe your current approach to staff recruitment? And we'll give folks a few minutes to answer this question. All righty, I see friends will tell us. I see inconsistent. I see create job description, post, interview, background check, all staff invested in process, need to find more ways, we are a county government agency. We'll give about a few more seconds. Perfect. All right, so thank you everyone for your responses. So kind of want to go over these a little bit more. So friends will tell us, right? So that is definitely something that we often do, right? So we often go by that word of mouth piece, right? And so, we may hear about somebody through a friend of ours who's like, oh, I think Jacob would be amazing for this role, right? Can he go ahead and apply, or can you go ahead and hire him and then just use me as a recommendation, right? Inconsistent, that is definitely, I'm sure whoever wrote that, I'm sure you are not the only one who feels that way, right? That is a general thing at some organizations, and that is not anybody's fault, right? That's just due to the current capacity and the current work that we do, right? Because we're doing so many other things that sometimes it can be inconsistent. And then all staff invested in the process. I love hearing that, right? Because recruitment is not just a one-person job. And even though it falls under the larger human resources umbrella, and it may lean on one person, all staff members should be involved, right? From maybe, you may be looking for a CFO, but maybe your program director is going to a certain event and they're going to table at that event. Maybe they can go ahead and talk about the positions that you all are hiring for, right? And then, there are some other things that I see here, listservs, Indeed, word of mouth, partner agencies, and things of that nature. So thank you, everyone, for those responses, and we'll kind of go over some of them as we move forward within the webinar. So the recruitment process, excuse me. So in the recruitment process, there are some things that you're going to be doing. First thing you're going to do is define the job and conduct a job analysis. And we're going to go over what a job analysis is. Then you want to determine the hiring team. Who is going to be responsible for bringing this amazing person on board, right? Who's going to be responsible for getting the materials together? Who's going to ask what questions? Who's going to develop the questions? Who's going to call the person to schedule the time for the interview? Who's going to work out all those logistical items, and who's actually going to sit in on the interview. Develop a position description, right? Making sure that a job or and you can either go back and forth between a position description or job description, but, making sure that is developed, right? Because that is going to be the guide, the beginning guide and the foundation that is going to help the employee navigate their role or their job duties. and then advertise the position, making sure that you get it out there, and you get it out there in, non-traditional spaces as well as traditional spaces. So traditional spaces may be Indeed.com, and then other job advertising websites. Non-traditional spaces may be, inside of a LGBTQ bar or inside of an LGBTQ resource center at a university, right? Those non-traditional, a mix of those non-traditional and traditional spaces. I know some individuals who post jobs in certain Facebook groups if they're looking to hire someone from a particular community or population. Right, and then reviewing those applications, making sure that you're taking the necessary time and effort to go through those applications, to making sure you're bringing in the right people for the interview, and then interviewing the applicant. Asking those key questions. So, and yesterday we kind of talked about some key questions that should be asked no matter the job that you're hiring for. Right, so things that get to the person's communication skills, that get to their organizational skills, that get to their time management and those types of things. And then after those key questions, those foundational questions, asking some questions that really speak to the position that you're hiring for. And then finally selecting the candidate, right? And, getting that letter together, getting that offer letter, with, the confirming their salary amount, talking about their benefits, talking about their first day, the expectations and things of that nature, right? And so making sure that you're doing all those great things. And those are some some functions that fall under the recruitment process. And so, we talked about in the previous slide a job analysis, right? And that may be a term that some people are unfamiliar with, and it may be a term that some people are familiar with. And so when we talk about a job analysis, it's just simply a process used to collect information about a position. And so the duties and responsibilities, the necessary skills, outcomes, and work environment. And we actually encourage organizations to do job analysis to really think about and be mindful of what they're going to be putting in the job description and what that person is actually going to be doing. I'm sure many of us have been in a position or been put in a position to where, we really don't know what our job is, right? How many of us have, heard somebody or even said ourselves, oh, well, I do everything plus this, plus that, plus this, plus that. I wear 25 hats, right? And 15 of those 25 hats are not actually in the job description. And so, we have to make sure that we're being mindful about, what we're putting in the job description, what we're thinking the employee's roles and responsibilities should be. And we can do that by really analyzing the job, really, doing some interviews. So maybe if there's a job that is comparable or maybe the same job, interviewing the current employees that are within that job and saying, okay, what exactly do you do? Right? Talk to me about what you do on a daily basis. Talk to me about some key things that are important for you to do your job, right? Doing those types of interviews and taking that information and that data to help inform what the job description and future duties and responsibilities of that position will be. It's used to inform the development of a recruitment plan, position description, and a performance management plan. And, as relates to a job analysis, a lot of people, when they think of analysis or they think of process or procedure, they automatically think it's this huge thing, right? It's step A through Z, and it's going to take them weeks to develop one and implement one, but that's actually not the case, right? A job analysis can very much just be, doing some key interviews, doing some, some research, collecting that data to help inform the job description. Age United can definitely assist you with building out a job analysis or a job analysis structure and process to help you really inform the roles and responsibilities of the position that you're hiring for. How to conduct a job analysis. So what you're going to want to do is collect information that differentiates the jobs, right? So you're going to talk about or collect information that gets to the knowledge, skills, and abilities that is needed for that job, right? So, for example, we'll take a CFO position, Chief Financial Officer, right? What knowledge does a Chief Financial Officer need to know? They probably need to know some things around budget, right? They probably need to know some things about reports. They probably need to have some experience with audits, right? Those are some key skills and knowledge and abilities that they probably should need to know right off the bat. Second thing, work activities and behaviors. What are the activities that they're going to be doing, right? Are they going to be, going out to community events and tabling? Are they going to have to be able to speak in front of audience and give presentations and go to conferences and give presentations and do workshops and things of that nature? Interactions with others. Are they going to be out in the community? Are they going to have to be able to know how to interact with community members? So if it's a tester that you're looking for, right, what is that interaction going to be like externally as it relates to community members and even internally? And, we're going to, that also can get to the communication piece, right? How are they going to communicate? Who are they going to communicate with? This also speaks to, are they going to have any subordinates? Are they going to have any employees? Are they going to, manage anyone, right? And what is that interaction and on what level? Performance standards. You're right. A job analysis will help you be able to determine what type of performance standards are going to be set forth for the position or for the job. Financial budgeting and impact, machines and equipment used. Are they going to have to use a computer? Are they going to have to use a certain testing kit? Are they going to have to use, whatever machinery that you may have within your agency or technology that you may have within your agency? Are they going to have to use that? Working conditions. Are they going to be outside a lot of the times? Are they going to be, in the office? Are they just going to be sitting down in a cubicle in an office just looking at a computer? Or does the work, require them to be, really going and meeting community members and, testing in community vans and going to bars and going to clubs and going to different types of neighborhoods and interacting with different types of people and different types of levels? Really thinking about all those things. And then supervision provided and received. These are all things that a job analysis will help to answer for you, all things that are important when defining a role for someone. The hiring team, everyone involved in the process from identifying the need for a new position through the onboarding of a new employee. So everyone from the moment that you are identifying that you need a new position to onboarding. That is the hiring team, because all those individuals have some type of influence as to who is going to get in that position and get in that role or have that role. Position description includes, so we talked about earlier in the slide before last, the job analysis. And we talked about how the job analysis can help inform the job description. And the job description, basically, it's a guide, it's a foundation that the employee can rely on to help lead them throughout their journey working for the organization. Some key things that should be in a job description is the overview of the organization. Who are we? Who is the organization? What do we do? What is our mission? What is our focus? What is our goal and our objective, right? Because the employee needs to see themselves in that. They need to see themselves in the organization. They need to know that the job that they are directly doing somehow, in some way, shape, or form impacts the mission and the objectives and the goals that the organization has set forth. Title and overview of the position. What's going to be the title? CFO, outreach specialist, program manager, program director, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what is the overview of that position? What am I going to be doing? Right? What is a brief summary of what I'm going to be doing so I can reference it, right? So I can utilize that tool. Job classification, exempt or non-exempt. This is very key, right? Because this gets into overtime, right? If an employee is at a certain status, then they need to get paid overtime. And if they're not getting paid overtime, then that can cause some legal trouble, right? And so making sure that you are putting the correct status with whatever job position you are posting or hiring for. Essential functions and tasks to perform the job. What are those key duties that are going to be that the employee will need to do? So, for example, are they going to have to test 300 people within the first year of the grant or within the first 2 years of the grant? Are they tasked with, attending 3 conferences out the year, not attending, but submitting an abstract and presenting at 3 conferences out the year? Are they tasked with submitting a report every 3 weeks about program deliverables and things that were done and not done, completed and not completed? Are they tasked with getting a certain amount of people within a certain intervention? So are they tasked with ensuring that they get 25 individuals in healthy relationships, or Twist or Willow? Are they tasked with making sure that they attend a EBI training to become a facilitator in order to be able to implement a evidence-based intervention within the organization? These are key things that need to be stated in the job description that they need to know that they need to complete. In the overview of the needed skills, education, and experience, what skills, education, and experience is needed in order to perform the job well? So if you know that you're wanting to hire someone, if you know that you just got funding to serve trans women of color, and you know that you want to hire someone that either has that experience or can relate, then that's probably something that needs to be listed in the job description, right? Having some type of line that states candidate must have lived experience with working lived experience as it relates to trans women of color, or experience with working with the trans population, right? Those are key things that you want to put in there. If it's a position that is very much, you definitely need a degree for example, being a CEO or CFO or COO, making sure that you put that degree that is needed in there. I also want to talk about, the degree levels a little bit more. And I want to encourage organizations that when building job descriptions and doing that job analysis, really being mindful, and having a balance of experience and degree level, right? Does someone really need a master's to be an outreach services specialist? Does somebody really need a PhD to be a program director over a program that is focusing on serving Black gay men within a certain community, right? These are all things that need to be thought about critically, right? Because we want to make sure that we're making room for individuals to be able to work and get that real life work experience, right? And if every position we're posting, you have to have a master's or a PhD, a lot of times when we're working with marginalized communities, that is not the case because of whatever barriers they have been set forth. So we want to make sure that we are being mindful, right, and we're being culturally humble when we're, thinking about the job analysis and job descriptions. And then reporting structure. Who are they going to report to? Are they going to report to the program manager? Are they going to report to the program director? Are they going to have two people that they report to? Are they going to have just one person that they're reporting to? That's important because they need to know who to go to for guidance. They need to know who to go to if they have any current issues with meeting program deliverables. They need to know who they can go to if they need some assistance with meeting program deliverables, right? They need to know who is their manager, who is their supervisor. And because there have been some situations that I've experienced or seen to where the employee doesn't know who their boss is, because they have two different people telling them, okay, I want you to do this, but no, I want you to do this. So they were hired with the impression that one person was their boss, but as they move forward in their career field, within their position, then here comes this other person who's telling them what to do, and they're confused. And that's what we don't want, right? We want to make sure that we let them know this is the specific person that you will be reporting to. And then salary range. I tell people all the time, I tell organizations all the time, it is okay to put the salary range on a job description. If you know that you cannot pay a certain position more than $45,000 a year, then put that in the job description, because that's going to help weed out individuals who may be looking for a higher salary range, right? You want to make sure that you're being upfront with that, because what you don't want to do is you get to the point of the hiring process where you're ready to make the job offer, and then you're sitting at the table with the candidate, or you have them on the phone, and you're finally going over the pay or salary range, and you're like, well, the salary range is $35,000 to $45,000, and then that person says, I'm sorry, I'm looking for $65,000 to $70,000, and you know that you don't have it in your budget to meet that, and now you have to go back in your candidate pool, or in some instances restart the hiring process all over again, which takes up time and costs more money. And so being upfront and putting that salary range on the job description is actually very helpful, right? Helpful in making sure that the candidate knows what they're getting themselves into, making sure that it's a way of saving the organization money so you don't have to backtrack and go back to the candidate pool, and just being honest and upfront and, stating and being honest and upfront about what you can pay an employee for that position or role. And then application method and due date and expected hire date and timeline, right? So these are all things that should go in a position description, a job description. And as I stated earlier in the call, we do actually have links to tools that you can download for not best practices, but a guide for a job description, right? So what should be in it, what should not be in it, et cetera, et cetera. We can actually provide some of those links and tools for you all. Some position description do's and don'ts. So do include work environment and location, physical demands, position type and expected work hours, travel expectations. Travel expectations is key, right? So if you know that you are hiring for someone who is going to be traveling, I'll use Ohio, for example. If you know that this position needs to be able to travel to all 88 counties within the state of Ohio, that needs to be listed within the job description, right? You need to make sure that they know that because, maybe that person may not have a vehicle. That's also something that you need to put in the job description if a vehicle is needed in order to perform their job, right? So they can be prepared so they're not to be transparent, so they're not wasting their time applying for a job that they know that they do not meet the needs or qualifications. Position type and expected work hours, travel, additional eligibility criteria, and affirmative action plans that's equal employer opportunity, right? You want to let folks know that you are a equal opportunity employer, right? So you do not discriminate against race, gender, sexual orientation, etc. That would be very, very helpful. And then the don't. List every task related to position. You do not need to do that. You just only need to list key tasks and key skills and key things that are going to be needed in order to do that job. You don't need to list everything because if you listed everything, the job description I'm sure would be 25 pages. Use font smaller than size 12 and limit advertising to only people in your network. So we have another audience poll. And so if you could take some time to answer this question for me, what are some creative ways you've advertised open positions? Again, what are some creative ways you've advertised open positions? And we'll give folks about 1 minute, maybe a little less. Awesome. So I see things like Facebook, Facebook and Indeed. I haven't, but am learning creative ways. Okay. Awesome, awesome. I want to thank everyone for responding to the polls. We're going to move forward with the next slide. So where, when, how to advertise. So tailor advertising approach to the needs of the position, disseminate via diverse networks and methods, post opening for at least a week. I want to hit on the second bullet point, disseminate via diverse networks and methods. Something that you can do is locate a community liaison or a community leader for the community that you're in or a certain population, right? So, for example, I know someone who manages a Facebook group on Facebook, right, a Facebook group on Facebook. And so, something that I would do is go to that individual and say, hey, I know that you have a huge reach and a huge following on Facebook or Instagram because of what you post and things of that nature. Do you mind posting this job description on your Facebook or Instagram or Twitter page so we can get more applicants, right? Or do you mind if I are going to a venue where a lot of individuals frequent of a certain population, a certain demographic that you want to work for you, posting the job position there, right? Just thinking and creating, just thinking of creative ways to advertise and post job openings. And again, we can definitely offer TA that is specific to your community and specific to your organization as it relates to this piece. Some HR tips. Use non-stigmatizing, gender-neutral language in position description and advertising that lets employees know that, you know what, this is a very affirmative space. This is a space that I can feel safe in. Consider the value of lived experience in addition to academic and professional experience. Limit length of position description to 2 pages, and create a folder to organize and track applications. So now we're going to talk about interviewing best practices. Yay! Interviewing must-have. So interview team. You have to have a team of people who are going to interview the person, right? Because nobody's just going to walk into a building and say, oh, I have the job, thanks. Or at least we're hoping that's not the case, right? You want to make sure that you have key people who are going to be involved in that process, involved in building the job description, doing the job analysis, and the recruitment, and the posting of the job, and the building of the job description, of, offering the job, etc. Confidential space to conduct the interview, right? You want to make sure that's in a space to where it's not loud, to where, not a lot of people know that you're doing the interview or who you're interviewing, right? You want to make sure that stuff is kept confidential. Set time and time frame for interview, right? Making sure that, maybe we should just do all of our interviews on Tuesday and Wednesday so we can make sure that we have Thursday and Friday and perhaps Monday to kind of talk about who we like and to be able to offer a job within that next Wednesday or Thursday. Because best practices to only have a week in between time, a week from the last interview that took place until the day you want to offer the job. Right, that is best practices because you don't want to keep the person waiting too long, and you want to also make sure you can fill that position. Making sure you have interview questions, criteria for assessing strength of candidate, and response to the question, when will you let me know if I have the job, made it to the next round of interviews. Deciding on the interviewing panel. Of course, definitely the direct supervisor should be on that interview panel, the person that candidate is going to go to for questions, comments, or concerns as it relates to their job or the organization. A colleague from a different department or program, somebody that they may work indirectly with, right? Somebody that they may partner on certain things or certain events with moving forward or certain programs. Direct coworkers, people who are already working in the program who they're going to be working with on a daily basis, right? Because you want to see if the culture is going to be positive, right? You want to make sure that individuals on the team are going to mesh, right? Or if you bring this person on, is there going to be a lot of conflict? Do the personalities match, right? Can they offer something? And a community stakeholder, I really want to emphasize this. So it is okay if you want to invite somebody who is of community to sit on that interviewing panel, especially if you're going to have somebody whose main role is to interact with community on an almost daily basis, right? So you want to make sure that they're able to have that rapport with community and be able to talk to them on a certain level, et cetera. And, I would also advise making sure that you're not just pulling anybody from community, right? Maybe looking at your community advisory boards or community members who may be on your boards for the organizations to sit on that interview because they tend to have a little bit more stake in the new hire or in the organization in general. So we have another audience poll. If you could take a few seconds to answer this question, it is, what's the best interview question that you've been asked or that you have asked? Again, what's the best interview question that you've been asked or that you have asked? Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. What's the best interview question that you've been asked or that you have asked? We'll give folks a few more seconds. Where do you see yourself in the next 2 years? That's an awesome question. So definitely getting to, okay, how can we develop you as an employee, right? That's actually a great question to ask because it allows the employee to be able to kind of give you insight on where they want to be in their future and how the organization can help develop them or what trainings that they can offer, right? That's an amazing question. Thank you for sharing that. Some other ones I see is what's your pet peeve? That's a definite good question. How do you tell a client or a supervisor or supervising someone? I cannot see the full, there we go, there's my arrow. How can you, press the wrong button. How can you tell a client or supervising someone, let me repeat that. How do you tell a client or a supervisee someone something they don't want to, it's not letting me see the whole question. I'm sorry, folks. It's not letting me read the whole entire line of the question, but I do see we have 5 responses, and from what I can read so far, some very good questions that were asked in the interview. But yes, so interview questions are key, and they can really, if done correctly, they can really make sure that you are hiring the correct person. If you look at the current slides, the types of interview questions that we want to ask are those questions that tell us about you. So why are you interested in this position? Why are you interested in this outreach services position? Why are you interested in being the CFO? Why are you interested in being this program director? Why? What is the purpose, right? Skills, education, training, and lived experience. What assets do you have that highlight your ability to fulfill the functions of this position, right? Scenario-based. How would you respond if? The scenario-based questions really, really, really are key, right? Because they can give you a little insight into how someone will handle a certain situation. Types of interview questions, some more style-related. How would you describe your work style, your role on teams, and what you look for in a supervisor? Self-assessment, what's a skill, experience, talent that you're most proud of that would help you to thrive in this position? And then what do you need? What would you need within your first week to set you up for success in this position? And definitely within the first week, but I would maybe even adapt that question and say, what do you need within your first year? Or even say, what do you need from the organization to continue to develop in your career, right? Getting to those types of questions, because that will show the person that you are interested, that you are genuinely interested in developing them and keeping them on staff and growing them. Because nobody wants to work for an organization to where they're in the same position for 20 years. Nowadays, people want to move forward and move up and be challenged in new ways. And if they're not going to do that, then they're going to leave the organization. That's what we don't want, especially if we already have great people working for us. Some interview do's and don'ts. I'm only going to go over a few, not the whole list. Listen more than you speak. So a lot of times interviewers may think that it's better for them to do all the talking and to talk about the job, or the case may be. That's actually not the case. The goal is for you to hear the interviewee, right? You need to hear and listen for key things that will let you know that they'll be great for this job, or key things that will let you know maybe they won't be the right fit for this position. Provide examples, stick to stated time frame, inform about next steps. Some things that you don't want to ask about are age, disability or health, plans to retire, workers' comp claims, religious affiliations, marital status, or child care arrangements. These are all things that can make you liable for a lawsuit, and all things that you want to stay away from. Selecting the candidate. So some things that you want to do, call at least 2 references. You want to make sure you call these references. You want to know how they've been able to, or what they've been able to do in their last job, right? You want to make sure that hey, I need to find out this person can actually write budgets. They said that they wrote budgets in their last role. Let me call the reference and just get, some brief things about this person and their roles and responsibilities to confirm. Writing samples and technology assessments. If you know that you're hiring a communications director, then you probably want to make sure that they know how to write a press release, right? And you probably want a sample of that. Make the offer. verbal first, then via writing, right? So that verbal is calling them saying, hey, we'd like to offer you a position of such and such with a salary of such and such to start on such and such date. Do you accept this offer? And then making sure you follow up with a written offer. And also be clear if counter offers will be entertained. And then the actual offer letter, the salary, the first day, the starting time, and then, we do have a link, a hyperlink that you can click on to download an example of an offer letter. Some HR tips. Silence is an effective tool in interviewing. Listen at least 75% of the time. Debrief the interview soon after the interview is conducted to obtain feedback. You don't want to wait too long after the interview. You don't want to wait a week or two after you interview someone to finally debrief about it, because even though probably some notes were taken down, you want to make sure that there are some things that maybe were not written down that are fresh in the mind that you can capture. And then send a thank you note to unsuccessful candidates, right? You want to make sure that you maintain those relationships, because you never know. Maybe that candidate that you didn't offer the job to may actually be great for another position. And so really maintaining that relationship as much as possible would be very key. And then onboarding best practices. Onboarding can be so fun. It's oftentimes my favorite part, right? An employee is newly hired. They're newly excited. The organization's excited about this new person. They're just ready for them to start. Everybody is sending emails, celebrating the new person. Maybe you put sticky notes and balloons. I don't know, maybe their first day they're walking through the hall of the office and everybody comes out their office and starts clapping, right, as the person's going down to their cubicle or desk or their office. Right? Onboarding is so important. It can be so fun. And we're going to talk about some onboarding best practices. But before we do that, I kind of want to get a feel about how your organization does onboarding. So if you could answer this poll for me, how does your organization engage in onboarding? And we'll give folks a few seconds to answer this question. All right. I see have a staff lunch within first 2 weeks of new hire start date for everyone to meet the person. Okay. That is definitely something that can be done and is exciting to do. We put a welcome sign up at the front door introducing the new employee. That is awesome. Email benefits, et cetera, in advance. Supervisor has a training calendar. Yes, I love that one, right? Because you're starting that engagement and you're starting that onboarding process before they physically get there. And especially if you run into a situation to where the employee is supposed to start like 2 weeks after you make the offer, you want to do as much as possible to kind of keep them engaged and start that excitement going. So I really like that response. Thank you for whoever put that in. Thank you for all the responses that have come in. And we're going to, I see another one. We provide a new employee orientation packet with an overview of what training will look like. Awesome. I appreciate that as well. Making sure that, I think it's key to get a folder set up that, has some key things that the employee will need for their first week, their first few weeks, or even their first few months, right? Maybe a map of, the organization. If it's a huge organization, it's a huge building, or if you have multiple locations, maybe have some type of communication in there that talks about what each location is. Maybe, of course, having in there benefits, pay scale, things of that nature. Maybe, some communication or literature about each of the programs within the organization. I think those are all great things to do. Maybe even have some candy in the packet for them. All great responses. So onboarding is the process of integrating a new employee within your organization and its culture. It's providing the new hire the tools, information, and support needed to be successful in their position, right? So it's about integrating that new employee, right? It's about getting them involved in the culture of the organization. It's about building that excitement. It's about letting them know that you are now part of the family. Something that I love about Age Unite, I'm going to brag a little bit about my organization, is that whenever we have somebody that starts is that we have many people from various departments of the organization come and talk to that person, right? We set up meetings for them to learn about each department and each program that's happening so they're well informed so they can, one, be able to talk about it when they go out and talk about AU in general, and maybe even, let's say that they have a public policy interest. They're like, okay, well, maybe there's opportunity for collaboration, or they can go to their supervisor and say, hey, within the first 2 years, I want to be able to transition into this department. That is perfectly okay, right? Because the goal is not necessarily, yes, we want to keep our employees within our program teams because they're so amazing, right? But the goal is just to keep them at the organization in general. And if we can develop them and make them happy and really show them that we're about them, then that should be what is on our minds, right? And onboarding can definitely be the foundation or the start of that, right? And making sure that they're introduced to the culture, introduced to the family. That's what onboarding essentially is. It's welcoming that person. It's like, you know what, we have a new child, a new person in the family. And we want to make sure that they have all that they need and all the tools that they need to be successful and all the skills that they need. And they're set up with the right technology, and they're set up with the right literature, and they're set up with the right programs. And, their direct deposit is going to hit on time. They're going to get paid on time, right? All these things that are important. Onboarding best practices is use a job analysis, position description, interview notes to tailor onboarding, right? All of these things can be involved in onboarding, right? So if you know that the person will be doing certain skills, not doing certain skills, but doing certain tasks, okay, how can we integrate that into onboarding, right? How can we integrate all these things and all this data that we've collected about this individual and this job and utilize that in the onboarding process? Obtain feedback from employees holding same or similar positions, right? What is it that you needed? Asking employees, what was missing during your onboarding process? What are some things that you wish you would have had? What are some things that weren't prepared for you that you felt as though would have helped you be better prepared for your role and your job duties? Invite teammates to support aspects of onboarding, right? So have everybody get involved. Make it a fun thing. Do a scavenger hunt. Have people decorate the cubicle together. Figure out the new hire's favorite candy or maybe even favorite book, if you have it in the budget to get these types of things from an employee. Just make it creative and go all out, right? Because we want them to feel special. We want them to let them know out of all the people that we interviewed, you've made it through, and we're so appreciative that you chose us to come and work for. Review onboarding plan with new hire and revise as needed, right? Sharing that onboarding plan with the new hire, sending that in an email maybe even prior to their start date, right? So they can go ahead and review that and they know what they're getting into even from day one. And then adapting it if needed, right? I don't know if you find that, maybe they can't make a certain meeting because all of a sudden an event pops up that they need to go to for their job, doing those type of amendments and those types of changes as needed with the employee. Ensure daily monitoring within the first week and subsequent weekly check-ins, right? There is nothing worse. Well, there are some things worse, but I would definitely encourage you to make sure that you are checking on that new hire daily, as like just once a day. That's okay, because that lets that person know, oh, okay, you know what, I can actually go to this person for any questions or concerns that I have. Because oftentimes a new hire is not going to feel comfortable right away with saying that they need help with something or admitting that they have a question, right? Because, essentially they're trying to prove themselves. They're trying to prove that they, deserve this job, right? And so to be able to help let down their defenses and let down their guards by, checking in with them. Hey, is everything going okay? Do you have everything you need? Do you want to go to lunch? Is your computer functioning okay? Is your work cell phone functioning okay? Is your phone functioning okay? Does somebody show you how to work your phone or your computer, et cetera? And then have backup support if supervisor can be involved the first week, right? I heard an example or a story someone was telling me that they started at a position and they had no idea who their supervisor was for like the first 2 weeks, they have not even met their supervisor until 2 weeks after their start date. That's what we don't want to happen. If the supervisor cannot be involved in the interviewing process for whatever reason, then please make sure they're involved in the onboarding process. And if they cannot be there the first week, then make sure if there's a co-supervisor, there's somebody who's right below, or even use virtual communication. Have that supervisor write an email to that employee that engages them from the start, right? That is very, very important because that shows that the supervisor is invested in the employee. Another audience poll that we have is, what do you wish you learned during the first week of your job? On the job. Again, what do you wish you learned during your first week on the job? And we'll give folks a few seconds to fill this out. Somebody put, I'm sorry, that was 23 years ago. I can't remember. Well, thank you for that. Someone else wrote what everyone else's roles were, who to go to for what, etc. Okay. Better understanding of what I would be doing. My job tasks were a little all over the place. I'm assuming that's what the rest of that says. How to manage sudden and exponential growth of the organization. The office politics. Oh, that is a good one. Office politics, right? How many of us wish we would have known all the politics and, you need to know this person to get to this position, or you need to know this person to kind of get what you need, or you need to be buddy-buddy with the office manager so you can make sure you get your supplies on time, right? Yes, that is definitely something that I have heard before in the past. And then I saw another one that somebody talked about or wrote in, what everyone else's roles were. And that's key, right? Because you want to make sure that your new hire can talk about the other amazing programs that are happening within the organization, right? You definitely don't want them to go out into the community and they're not able to talk about the agency, right? What would it look like for me as a capacity building specialist, someone whose main job is to go out and facilitate, to not know much about anything else Age United does, right? People would probably look at me like, what is going on, right? So the fact that I can talk about the policy department, as well as the grant-making department, as well as, our TLI program, as well as our SHIFT program, as well as our POP program, right? The fact that I can talk about these programs and what they do and the populations they interact with, et cetera, makes a huge difference, right? Because I interact with different types of populations and communities than those programs may, right? And so maybe there is other people or other things or other opportunities that I can bring to those other programs within AU, right? It's just a full circle. We're all a family, right? We're all looking out for each other. We all want each other's programs to grow and succeed and be successful, right? And so that is definitely major, making sure that your employer, your new hire, actually everybody in the organization knows as much as possible about the different programs that are happening within the agency. All right, so onboarding plan. So an onboarding plan includes, and again, I don't want folks to get in their minds like, oh my gosh, here's another plan that I have to sit and build for 2-3 weeks, and it's going to take time, and I have this grant to write, whatever the case may be. These are some simple steps that you can do. So an onboarding plan includes organizational elements, payroll, benefits, policies, and procedures, meeting staff from across the organization, programmatic elements, essential reading, right, quick reference guides, team meeting agendas, notes, grant application, etc. Orientation to share, drive, program files, and how things are organized, shadowing, mentoring, building a rapport with the team. I think the mentoring piece is really key, right? Because even though you're hiring someone because you know that they're able to do the job, because they've proven either through the resume, the interview, or whatever assessments or writing samples that were submitted, that they can definitely do the job and do it well. But to still have that mentoring piece, because that mentor essentially can help that person be able to guide through the office politics or be able to guide them through the culture of the organization, right? And so having that mentor that can kind of show them the ropes. I know, like, when I first started my role at Age United as a capacity building specialist, I have, done presentations in the past, right? I've done plenty of workshops. I've presented at conferences. I've trained, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the way our capacity building team at Age United does it is a little different than what I was used to. So to be able to have a mentor at Age United really helped me to learn the flow, to really help me to be able to adapt to the culture of the way we do things and how we do CEBA and technical assistance and training within Age United, which was very helpful because then I felt, okay, I can do this. If that person doesn't have that mentor or that guide or that guidance, then they're going to feel as though, okay, maybe I really can't do this. Oh, I'm stumbling all over the place. Oh, my gosh, I'm not going to be good enough. My work's not good enough. It looks so different than everybody else's, right? That can kind of weed some of that out. And then an onboarding plan also includes intentional efforts to learn communication styles, align schedules, establish priorities and goals, clear tasks and mutually agreed upon timelines, and opportunities for ongoing feedback on needs, performance strengths, etc. And then here's a link that folks can click on that gets to a simple onboarding schedule. And again, you can contact Age United, our CEBA team, to help flesh this out a little bit more for you, to make it or to help adapt it to your specific needs, etc. Some onboarding do's and don'ts. New hire all staff announcement. So, for example, sending out a simple email, hey, Age United staff, we want to make sure that you know that we have a new staff member, Kelly Stevens. She's amazing. She comes from blase, blase, blase. She has all this blase, blase experience. Welcome her. Send her a note. Stop by her cubicle or her office and say hello. Take her out to lunch. Give her a cupcake, whatever the case may be, right? Prepare workspace in advance, right? Make sure you have the workspace created in advance. If the person needs a laptop or computer, make sure you have that set up. Make sure you have the necessary tabs or whatever they'll need already set up on their laptop. They have their passwords. They have their office keys. They have their ID badge. They have their work cell phone. Their telephone is set up. They have their trash can. They have their pens, their pencils. They are just ready to go from day one. Facilitate contact with key employees, letting them know, okay, these are the key individuals that you need to know. You definitely need to know the person in payroll in case something happens with your pay. You definitely need to know the person in benefits, so you can set that up. You definitely need to know your supervisor. You definitely need to know the person who does all the ordering of supplies for the organization. You definitely need to know this person, etc. Set tangible and realistic goals for the first 30, 60, and 90 days. Tangible is the key word. Tangible and realistic are the key words in this statement, right? You don't want to set unrealistic goals because you don't want to set the employee up for failure, right? Too many times what happens is we will, all right, starting day one, okay, now you have to go out and you have to test 300 people within the first 3 weeks of your job or within the first 30 days of your job, and they have to be unduplicated. Okay, folks, I don't know where you're working at, but I don't think it's possible anywhere to test 300 people within the first 30 days of anybody's new job. And, of course, I'm exaggerating, right? But there are things that are put on employees that are just like that. So it's not too far from an exaggeration. And so what I'm saying is you want to make sure that you are making the goals that are realistic and tangible, right? Because a lot of times, we'll put these unrealistic goals on someone, expectations, and then we're setting them up for failure. And then when they don't meet them, then we want to do disciplinary action. When really it was, we should have looked at those goals and been a little bit more realistic, given the time constraints, given the fact that they need a certain period to get acclimated to the organization, to get acclimated to the program, to get acclimated to the culture, the mission, the values, acclimated to the community, acclimated to the grants, acclimated to whatever else that they need in order to perform their job well. And then establish weekly check-ins, right? I love the fact that still 2.5 years into working Age United, I still have weekly check-ins with my supervisor, right? That is key because you need to be able to, talk about, all right, how do you feel? What's your workload like this week? Are you feeling okay? Do you need something, to be taken off your plate? Do you need something to be added onto your plate? Is there something that you're interested in doing? Is there a conference that you want to go to? It's important to have those types of check-ins because, it builds a relationship. It builds a rapport with the employee. So don't assume that they'll just figure it out. Do not assume that. We don't want them just to figure it out, right? We want them to be able to say, hey, I'm actually having trouble with meeting these deliverables. can you help me, or can you help me think about some creative ideas to go ahead and go about that? And then don't assume they know how to fulfill all expectations of a job simply because they were hired for it. That is not the case. I will share a secret with you all, and you all probably know this secret. But a secret is that many people, right, they will, say, oh, I can do budgets, I can do Excel, I can do Microsoft Word, and you are convinced. And then day one, you tell them to write a budget or use Excel, and what you don't know is they may really not know how to. So they're doing research on Google on how to write a budget or use a spreadsheet, right? And so we don't want to assume these things. Of course, those are basic skills, right? Basic skills that they should have because we asked them if they had, or the case may be. So that may be an exaggeration. But I say that to say is that you don't want to assume that just because that they can do the job in its entirety just because they were hired for it, because that is oftentimes not the case, right? A lot of times we are coming into a position to where we have to learn something new. We don't know everything because why? Not every organization is the same. Not every organization does it the same way. Not every organization uses the same system. So, for example, there's a system that we use called CRIS. CRIS is a system where we get all of our TA requests, and we, use that system field to submit action plans and closeout reports and all those wonderful things. That was a new system that I had to learn how to utilize. Even though I knew how to facilitate, I knew how to, put a PowerPoint together, whatever the case may be, I did not know how to use CRIS. So that was something that I had to learn. And my team could not assume that I knew how to utilize CRIS. They had to ensure that I did, right? And that means walking me through the system and making sure that I understood it. All right, another poll that we have here is, how does your organization onboard new hires who previously received services at your organization? I'll repeat this again. How does your organization onboard new hires who previously received services at your organization? So, for example, if I, Adrian Neal Jr., am now working for organization A, and I've been receiving, HIV services, how do you onboard me? We'll give folks a few seconds to this poll. Be honest and upfront about expectations. We do the same thing as if they were not a client, but they are more familiar with services. I'm assuming that's what the rest of that means or is stating. I don't think there was much of a difference. Some adjustment due to knowledge. Awesome. As anything else but transfer case management to a supervisor. I like that one. So there's no conflict of interest. Okay. All great responses. Definitely being honest and upfront about expectations, because a lot of times, it looks different when you're hiring a client who used to or who currently receives services who may have different expectations, or you may have different expectations or have categorized them a certain way, and now that looks totally different because now they work for the organization. So they have different expectations, right? They have different, I don't want to use the word demands, we'll stick with expectations. So, just being mindful of those nuances and what that employee who is a client actually needs, right? And, being mindful of their information, who has access to that. Are they working in case management and their coworker, their colleague used to be, their case manager, and what does that dynamic look like, right? Making sure you're really thinking about all things, not just in all those things, not just in the onboarding process, but from the very beginning. So some HR tips, if possible, go out for coffee or lunch on new hires first day, right? I love that, free coffee, free lunch. I love free food. Whoever knows me knows I do. So, that's always a good thing. Every new hire can benefit from some type of onboarding, regardless of how qualified they are for the job. onboard everybody. Onboard everybody. And there are some definite onboarding activities that Age United that we can give you. I know some organizations that do a scavenger hunt, and so as a way to learn the different departments of the organization, they'll make it into a fun scavenger hunt. I know people who, will send the new hire a questionnaire that gets to questions like their favorite spots to visit, their favorite vacation spots, their favorite candy, their favorite food, and maybe they'll have a postcard of that favorite vacation spot on their desk. They'll have their favorite candy on their desk. They'll have balloons in their favorite color surrounding their cubicle, right? Just those little things that really show the employee that they are really appreciated from day one. So, folks, we have now come to the end of webinar 2. Yay! You have made it through. I hope that you have learned some new things, or if nothing else, been able to think about things in a different way. Again, Age United is here for you. Also, please remember webinar 3 tomorrow will be some live TA. So we'll be going over some key questions. So please come with questions for us to answer and for us to work through with you. We'll have some questions that we can also go over. So I want to thank everyone for attending webinar 2 of the Human Resources Management webinar series. And I'm going to pass it over to Kelly, who is going to talk to you about some resources and some TA.
Thanks so much, Adrienne. Actually, we have a little bit of time, so if folks are interested, we'd love to hear any questions that you have, just about anything that we've covered on today's webinar. We talked about position descriptions and best practices around strengthening those. We talked about strengthening interview process and some of the tips and tricks that are helpful to just employ in that process. And then we also just landed not too long ago in talking through some of those really solid strategies around bringing on a new person as far as kind of onboarding and ensuring that folks have what they need to do the job. So thank you so much, Adrienne. There's so many really great things that came out of this conversation and in this collaborative learning space. So please, please, please feel free. We have, again, a little bit of time to answer a couple of questions. You can go ahead and type the questions right there in the chat box that you'll see on the screen. As they come in, I'll go ahead and forward them on to Adrienne. So I'll give you a little time to do that. All right, so it looks like we have a question that came in for Adrienne. The question is, what if I am the only person responsible for everything in my organization? What top things should I take away from this webinar?
Awesome question, and I'm sure that is the experience of many individuals on the colleges out there in the world today. So if you are, the only person that is, taking care of the HR functions within your organization, then this webinar was for you. And so making sure that, there are key things that you have put in place, so the hiring, the recruitment, and the onboarding. And I would even say, involving other people in those systems, right? So when it comes to the interviewing piece, if you notice, each piece was not just one person managing it, and not just one person can manage it. So when it comes to the interviewing process, really thinking about critically who should be on that interviewing team. So if you're the only person doing the HR piece, great, but should that supervisor be in on that as well? Should, somebody from that team? And the interviewing team doesn't have to be 12 to 15 people, right? It can be 3 to 4 individuals. Sometimes it's 2, right? So just being critical about who are the key people who need to be in that interviewing. And then when it comes to developing interviewing process, you as the key person, maybe you do have to develop that process, but then asking for input, doing maybe having a survey, not a long survey, but a 3-question survey that you can, disseminate among staff members within the organization and ask them, what was the interview process like for you? What would you wish would have different? What was missed? What needs to be added, right? And then taking that data and using that to help inform the process, right? When it comes to the onboarding process, again, that is not something that is a one-person job. And so even though you are the only person managing those human resources functions, again, managing the function, right, you should also be involving that team, right, who that person will be working on or working with or working for, right, involving them in that onboarding process, right? So even though you may be the main person, the only person, I would encourage you to assert yourself and not be that one person that's doing everything. Maybe you're the person that, writes the foundation of the policies and procedures as it relates to the hiring, recruitment, and onboarding process, but you're not the only person implementing those types of things. And we can definitely talk more about you if you, request us for capacity building assistance. We can definitely make sure that we work with you to be able to tailor some of those policies and procedures for your organization specifically. And thank you to whoever asked that question.
All right. Thanks so much, Adrian. I have a couple of other questions that actually have come in. I just want to quickly, on what you just said, I really appreciate that you had mentioned the piece around involving the team in the onboarding process and the importance of that, right? I think oftentimes that piece is missed, where there's just so many things going on at the same time. So many people are kind of trying to just manage the realities of not having that person there for an extended period of time, not having that role filled, but to build into a solid sense of like a team, right? And start to build into what it means to work together, who the person is, get to know one another, can really enrich and strengthen, right, the experience, not only of the person coming in, but of that kind of team culture. So I really just wanted to highlight that because I feel like that's so important. So I'll move on to the next question. So what if I have to hire people living with HIV? How do I address this in the development of the job description as well as the interview? What kind of language is acceptable to use within that space?
Definitely. So this is a question that we get a lot of times. And so something that I would recommend is putting something in the job description or, in the advertisement of the job, looking for someone with lived experience as it relates to HIV, right? So if you were specifically looking for someone who is HIV positive for a certain position, then putting something like that in the job description not job description, but in the advertisement, right? Because that will automatically let people know, all right, lived experience. Okay, so, the assumption is, okay, I must be living with HIV to be able to do this job, or that's the desired candidate that they're looking for, right? And that is perfectly okay to do. And then, when in the interviewing, to confirm that, just asking the question, what type of lived experience do you have, or what type of experience do you have with working with the HIV community, right? And they may be able to, and they may disclose that, okay, I'm HIV positive, so I have some personal lived experience to work with working with HIV, or, I actually have worked 10 years in the field, blah, 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 right? Just asking that simple general question that will allow you to get to that.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for one more question. And the question reads, how long after the final interview should you let candidates know where they stand?
No more than 1 week is best practice. No more than 1 week from the final interview that you do. So if your final interview takes place at 3 p.m. on Wednesday, then by that next Wednesday, you should follow up with the employee, right? With the candidate. And if you're not ready to offer a job, then at least say, hey, I just want to follow up with you. We're still in the process, et cetera. It's taking longer than expected, but you don't want to leave the candidate hanging. And you don't want them to always have to communicate or follow up with you, right? You want to go ahead and take that responsibility because that shows that you care about the candidate's time and you care about them, right, which is key.
All right. Thank you so much, Adrian. I believe that those are all of the questions that we have. Thank you all for submitting your questions. And as Adrian had mentioned, we love talking about this stuff. Adrian is awesome at talking about this stuff. And so if additional questions come up, please do feel free to reach out to us. We have a couple of recommended resources here. Take a look at this. As Sarah mentioned on the top of the webinar, we will be sending out links to all of those who've registered for the webinar, and you can also find this recorded webinar on our website. So you'll have access to these links after the webinar is closed, but you'll see here that there are tons of resources, including AIDS United as a resource to help to strengthen your human resource practices. So with that said, please do join us tomorrow for the final webinar in our series of 3. This webinar will be a live TA session just focused on recruitment, interviewing, as well as onboarding. Same time, same space, so it'll be at 2 p.m., starting at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific time. And if you haven't already registered, please do feel free to do so by clicking on that link or copying and pasting that link, depending, to join us tomorrow with Adrian, who will be leading that session as well. So thank you so much. I'll pass it over to Adrian for any final thoughts.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I just want to say thank you to everyone who attended Webinar 2. Please make sure you register for Webinar 3. And please reach out to AIDS United for any questions, comments, or concerns you have about human resources management. And thank you so much, and we look forward to hearing from you all and speaking to you again tomorrow.
All right. Thanks
everyone
so much.
Have a great day.
Everyone. All righty. Bye. I see that there are still some folks on, and that's so awesome because we have a closing evaluation. Just want to give you a heads up, rather, that as soon as you close out of the room, there is an evaluation that will pop up. Please do take a moment or two to fill out the evaluation, answer some of those questions, because they'll help to strengthen our delivery of future webinars, particularly this series of 3. So we'd love to hear your feedback and look forward to reading it. Appreciate it. And this now concludes our webinar.